Randomly I saw this and I thought I wanted to talk about it because I think I've been preaching this type of stuff for a while, mostly regarding the random show when it comes to certain comedians and stuff, right? And what I've been preaching on the random show regarding certain comedians is advocating for quitting, encouraging quitting, and not seeing quitting as like a bad thing. Because, you know, I analyze sometimes or review or talk about stand-up comedy a lot. I like doing it, but it can sometimes be very, very, very depressing because a lot of these guys are terrible at what they do. And you're having to watch hour-long specials. You're having to cover a bunch of stuff that these guys put on. It can just get a little bit draining, right? To kind of watch a lot of shit stuff again and again and again. But it's also kind of weirdly confusing because a lot of these guys I watch online are some of the best. A lot of these guys and girls are some of the best in their field, highly rated, all the best endorsements, specials on Netflix, Hulu, all these big fucking streaming platforms, yet they consistently put out some of the worst stand-up you've ever heard in your entire life. And I remember on a random show I'll be like, you know what, why don't these guys just quit and focus on the podcast? A lot of these guys anyway they probably make a lot more money doing podcasting than they would do doing comedy. If they don't, it probably is way less stress to be a podcaster than it is to be a fucking stand-up comedian anyway. So why don't you just focus on that? And obviously, you know, the response I would get back, I think, if I'd ask a comedian, why don't some of them just quit and focus on podcasting, is that they want all the money, right? Comedians, I think, I mentioned it on the previous episodes, I think comedians might be, although comedians are like on the lowest rung of the entertainment ladder in terms of talent and need for society. I think they're on the lowest rung. I think the only people above comedians are DJs. But I think comedians, even though they're on the lowest rung of the totem pole when it comes to being in the entertainment industry, they're also the most like money minded. They don't miss a trick when it comes to money. Like you'll never see most comedians, wherever you see them, they get in a bag. They never turn down bags. They're always fucking chasing bags. That's all that's on the fuck in their mind. So I think a lot of them just don't want to quit stand up because why would you quit if you can make all that money? But I think some of them do for the betterment of the fucking, you know, industry itself, so that we all don't think they're fucking shit. Some of them got to move out of the way. And I think the same thing applies to music. So when I saw this, I was a little bit, you know, upset and annoyed because I'm a fan of the artist. But I was also a little bit refreshed, like, okay, cool. This is actually a good thing. Look at this, courtesy of Fearbuck. I'm not sure if this is true, but they're saying that Lil Baby's team has announced that he's retiring from music. I don't know what that means. I don't know if this Instagram account, which is called Wolfpack Music, is Lil Baby's like subsidiary, if it's his management company, I don't know. But it's got a black background with a black heart, and underneath it says Baby retiring from music. This is crazy. So I'm not too sure if this is tied in with what happened with Young Thug and the phone calls getting leaked and blah 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 blah. But it looks like Lil Baby is retiring from music, and you know, considering the last few albums that he's put out have been pretty horrible. He definitely hasn't been able to recapture or kind of, you know, ever touch the success and just the ability and just the music that he was putting out when he first kind of burst onto the scene. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was like a 3-year run, a little bit. It felt like a 3-year run where he put out some amazing records, amazing freestyles, and he wasn't able to recapture it. Now, I have to give him a little bit of grace and say that I remember him doing an interview. I think he did an interview with Lil Yachty, I think. And he kind of, you know, revealed to Lil Yachty that he was actually at Young Thug's house before Young Thug got arrested on a YSL RICO. He just left a few hours earlier. So if he would have been there later, he probably would have got wrapped up in the RICO too. But he left a few hours before. So all those guys are his like friends, right? So they all get wrapped up in the RICO. And around that same time, there was murmurs in the industry that the Atlanta was working, you know, the Atlanta fucking court, whatever it's called, were also working on a case to run a RICO on Lil Baby's group called 4PF, I think, 4PF. And I think that also was around the time that he decided to disband it and kind of dissolve the whole 4PF thing, because I think he also heard the same rumor. And I think he admitted on a Lil Yachty interview that the YSL RICO really kind of shook him up. It kind of prevented him from making music. It prevented him from rapping a certain way, because I'm assuming a lot of his bars, which we probably aren't aware of, they're probably talking about a lot of real street shit. but he was able to talk about it in a way that people didn't really clock and people weren't really paying attention, whatever. But now with the target on him with this whole YSL Rico thing, he probably felt he couldn't really be himself, you know. So he was so that might explain why we got such subpar music, because he was always thinking in the back of his mind that the Rico could hit any day and you could, you know, not be free anymore. And then I'm assuming also off the back of that, the Young Thug interview and all the backlash or the fallout from the leak conversation could have also shook him, because, you know, he probably has an image of Young Thug being one way. Then when your phone calls get leaked from you in jail, where you think they'll never get leaked, right? You're talking the most crud on there. You're probably talking a little bit too much. And for somebody that, you know, thinks they're street dudes, is probably a big disrespect, and he's probably just disillusioned. But regardless of the reason, I think for Lil Baby, considering the amount of money he's probably made from music, considering the options he probably has now going forward, I probably think now would be the best time to retire and just focus on other things, whether it's streaming, whether it's managing and shit, opening a fucking bar, restaurant, the studio, fucking weed shop. That wasn't such a bad idea. I think it should be encouraged way more. The worst thing I think you could do, again, I've never made music, right? All I do is DJ. I've never made music, but I think if I was to make music at the level of Lil Baby, especially considering the success he had in the past, and then you're putting out these projects that you're pouring your heart into, but no one seems to be fucking with them, that will break your heart, you know? So why would you put yourself through that unnecessary heartbreak when you know your heart's not in it, and just choose to do something else that you really give a shit about? That might be the best way to kind of approach stuff. So I'm all for this. If this is true, I'm all for this. If this is true, I'm all for this.